As long as I can remember, my father has always told me about my family history. When I was little, I would never really pay attention. As I got older, I would start listening more and more. Then one Christmas, one of my dad's presents was a membership to Ancestry.com. He started finding out everybody that he was related to, and he began showing me family trees. He always knew he was related to some Bells, but he didn't know he was related to one of the most famous Bells of Tennessee history. The only famous Belle we knew we were related to was John Bell, who was haunted by the Bell Witch. As my dad kept looking on Ancestry.com, he discovered Montgomery Bell as being his great-grandfather 4 times removed and my great-grandfather 5 times removed. My dad, a history guru, couldn't help but be excited when he found this out. He began sharing more and more information with me as he began finding pictures and articles on Montgomery Bell. It sparked my interest to do my own research and create this documentary. On January 3, 1769, Montgomery Bell was born in Fallowfield Township, Chester County, Pennsylvania, to John and Mary Pattison Bell. He was the youngest of 9 children. Little is known about his childhood other than a legend that has been told through the years. It is said he visited his brother John, a commissioned officer for General George Washington, in Valley Forge in the early morning of the birth of America. Bell grew up in Pennsylvania, which at the time was full of active furnaces and forges that produced iron and steel. In Chester County, he had plenty of opportunities to learn the methods of ironmasters such as Samuel Van Leer and Isaac Potts. He had chances to observe Great Valley and Reading Forge, but he decided to choose a different vocation. At the age of 16, he learned the trade of tanning leather from animal hides. He quickly learned he disliked working with animal hides, and after 3 short years, he engaged in trading. Once he earned enough money, him and his brother started a business that manufactured hats. In 1787, he learned of the passing of his brother-in-law in Lexington, Kentucky. His sister, Elizabeth, and her 6 children were far from home without any means of income. He abandoned his share of the partnership and traveled to Lexington to help his sister. At the age of 20, he rented a house for his sister's family and opened a hat business. The business quickly grew and employed 20 workmen. He also traded horses, purchased real estate, and built water-powered mills along with houses. During his 12 years in Lexington, he perfected his understanding of the use of water as a prime mover for milling equipment. He also learned how to select and improve sites to make them become the most effective in the use of water power. In 1802, Bell moved to Middle Tennessee to operate Cumberland Furnace, which was established in 1793 by James Robertson. It didn't prosper like expected, so Bell came to operate the furnace and bring in revenue. 2 short years later, in 1804, Bell purchased the Cumberland Furnace and 640 surrounding acres for $16,000. Also in 1804, he sat as a member of the First County Court of Dickson County. Between 1805 and 1809, he bought Yellow Creek Iron Works and 4,800 acres of timber and iron ore. On April 16, 1809, Bell's oldest brother, Patterson Bell, wrote to a federal purchasing agent that he would like to make ammunition with his brother and send it to the Battle of New Orleans. Montgomery Bell informed the Secretary of War that his furnace was fully capable of producing all sizes of balls for cannonballs. The Bell brothers were awarded this desired contract and produced ammunition for the Army. The brothers also produced the Navy with whiskey and gunpowder. Andrew Jackson wrote a letter to John C. Calhoun in 1820 that stated, his contract formerly was with the Navy Department in 1812 or 1813, and as far as I had knowledge of the balls, his were considered of a superior quality. Later, in 1820, Bell sold the Cumberland Furnace and 4,800 acres to Anthony W. Van Leer and Company for $50,000. Bell never just had one project to complete. While he was running the Cumberland Furnace, he also built Old Jones Forge and built Duck River Ore Bank. He sold the Cumberland Furnace so he could use his time and money for other projects. Many of his slaves were helping to operate these projects. Montgomery knew how to select a good site for major sources of water, and in 1818, it's been said he made the wisest decision in his entire life. He purchased the Narrows of the Harpeth River from Jonathan Johnston. Bell drilled and blasted a tunnel through the limestone to create a 16-foot fall of water. He would later construct 2 water wheels which would operate hammers. The hammers forged pig iron into pans, kettles, pots, and other iron products. Many slaves he brought from Kentucky, skilled white workmen, and bondsmen excavated this tunnel from limestone. The tunnel was finished in 1819, which could make it the oldest tunnel in the United States. In 1820, he was also known as the largest slave owner in Dickson County with 83 slaves. The tunnel was 290 feet long and the mouth was 15 feet wide by 6 feet high. Many told Bell there was no way he could complete a project this size, but he proved them all wrong, and water was flowing out of the tunnel by 1819. Shortly after Bell finished the tunnel, he offered to sell the Narrows to the federal government to build an armory. Bell also asked that Andrew Jackson share this with John Calhoun, who was the Secretary of War. Jackson wrote Calhoun that informed him this would be ideal for an armory and that this would help the federal government out enormously. William Carroll also wrote John Calhoun a letter that stated he hoped commissioners would investigate this land. John Davis was to survey the land because he had grown up in that general area. Davis eventually submitted a letter that stated the Narrows wouldn't be as beneficial as expected. Bell also wrote a letter that described his tunnel and the land around it. His sales pitch was simple in that he said, "There is not a site of the western waters that combines as much power and safety as the Narrows of the Harpeth." When he found out about Davis's report, he sent another letter to commissioners that stated his findings were inaccurate. William Carroll wrote to Thomas Jarrell of Charlotte to assist Davis in surveying this land again. Davis was sick on the day it took place, so Bell, a neighbor, and another Charlotte resident helped the surveyors. The findings were quite different the second time. Carroll then sent the Army engineers out to devise plans for the armory. The engineers feared the armory could be flooded when it rained excessively, so Bell installed a high wall after reading the reports. The panic of 1819 and the fear of flooding eventually crushed any hope that Bell would sell the tunnel to the government. Come 1823, Bell sent a letter to the General Assembly that if the state ever established an armory or state prison, that the Narrows would be up for sale. Like before, his offer was declined. In 1824, he built the Bellevue Furnace after buying the Mother Ore Bank a year earlier. Between 1823 and 1830, his iron empire in Middle Tennessee was slow. Around 1830, he completed Valley Forge with a dam that provided power to operate the hammers. The water was redirected to create more power. Valley Forge was named after an area that George Washington's Revolutionary War Army had retreated to in the darkest days of the American Revolution. Bell had visited one of his older brothers, a Revolutionary War officer, there when he was 8 years old. This left a vivid impression on a young boy. Later that year, he began constructing the forges for the Narrows of the Harpeth. The ironworks at the Narrows of the Harpeth were named Pattison Forge after his mother's maiden name that he greatly admired. By the spring of 1832, the forges were operational. The forges hammered the pig iron into pots, pans, kettles, and other useful iron products. Pattison Forge was becoming a small industrial city by 1833. In the early 1830s, Bell owned close to 100 slaves that worked his furnaces and forges. The wives were thought to have cultivated the land around the Narrows, while the children probably helped their mothers do odd jobs around the forges. Bell bought Ashland in Williamson County in 1834 and lived there only 4 short years. Little is known about the last years of Bell's life. The last furnace Bell built was the Worley furnace in 1844 at the Mother Ore Bank. This furnace was the first that utilized a steam-powered cold blast system. The steam engine provided power to produce many tons of pig iron weekly. This furnace was named after Bell's first slave he purchased in Kentucky, and over the years they grew to become close friends. James Worley guarded his fortune and supervised many of Bell's projects in Middle Tennessee. Many of Bell's slaves were descendants of his beloved slave and friend. By 1850, Bell owned over 350 slaves that worked at his furnaces and forges. Before Bell died, he responded to the American Colonization Act by freeing many of his slaves and transporting them to Africa. He never separated families while sending them to Liberia. The first time he sent a family of slaves overseas, many died, which was devastating to Bell. He sent his nephew to England to purchase machinery for the furnaces and forges so the slaves would have work when reaching Africa. There are no records that report how many slaves Bell sent to Africa. April 1st, 1855, Montgomery Bell died at his cabin located at Valley Forge. It is said the windows to his cabin were opened when he died and snow had settled on his bed. Bell had left $20,000 to the University of Nashville for the purpose of establishing a school for children who were extremely poor, and $1,000 to Nashville's First Presbyterian Church. Dempsey Weaver invested the $20,000, and come 1867, the original amount had grown to $46,000. Montgomery Bell Academy was founded by Dr. John Lindsley with this money. As of 2013, Montgomery Bell Academy has been school to thousands of young men for 167 years. A state park has also been named after Montgomery Bell. Montgomery Bell State Park began in the 1930s and is known as one of the most popular recreational areas in Tennessee. The tunnel at the Narrows of the Harpeth was nominated to the National Register of Historic Places and became listed on April 16, 1971. The tunnel has withstood the withering time and water. As of today, the tunnel is still very much visible at the Narrows of the Harpeth. Montgomery Bell is often called the Iron Master of Tennessee. Bell passed away 158 years ago, but many of his works can still be visited today. Bell's determination and hard work have impacted Middle Tennessee over the last 150 years. morning at the Harpeth River State Park. How has the tunnel changed over time, and what damage did it flood in 2011?
Okay, it was in 2010, May 1st and 2nd. As far as how the tunnel's changed, it's basically eroding and collapsing. I believe it's doing what is, as far as what's natural in Tennessee, limestone. You know, we have a lot of caves in Tennessee. So, I mean, it's bound to happen. It's, you know, caverning out from the far end. This side of the tunnel here, the mouth is probably about as close to the original side, other than the erosion from the waterfall over time wearing on this down as far as, you know, the water getting closer. Because I believe the original drop was about 14 foot at this time when they're, you know, doing the iron rings.
Question number 2. How do you think Bell influenced the economy of this area?
From what I understand, what I've read, Montgomery Bell was the richest man in Middle Tennessee. I've even heard some of the local folks, I've never read anything, say that he was the richest man in Tennessee in his time. So, I mean, he owned tons of property, also a very shrewd businessman, you know, so, I mean, he was a pivotal part of the economy of this area, not to mention the iron ore that he produced and sold, which, you know, he won an award in 1851 for some of the best iron ore in the world. So, I mean, not only was he contributing to the economy here, I think he was contributing to the economy globally. And also the knowledge of iron ore that was passed on through what he learned through his processes.
Based on what you've heard, read, and researched, what do you think Bell would have to do?
From what I've heard, read, and researched, he was not a nice guy. Very, like we said a minute ago, very shrewd businessman. I've actually seen records. You can go back to Dickson County court records. It's Cheatham County now, but it was Dickson County back then. And you can see if he borrowed money from you, for example, you would have to sue him to get it back. And I don't understand why people kept lending him money after they knew this fact. But, I mean, he eventually would get it back, but they had to go to sue to get it. And you can go back in those court records and see lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit against Montgomery Bell to, you know, reclaim those funds. So, very shrewd businessman. But now, like I said, on his deathbed, you know, we talk about him being, you know, not very nice guy, but on his deathbed, or not long before he died, you know, he set all his slaves free. I believe he had an epiphany moment or whatever, but he set them all free, paid to teach them a trade, or paid to send them back to Africa if they wished. He gave money to start a boys' school, Montgomery Bell Academy, which was originally started as a school for the underprivileged. That's not the case now, but back then that was his original school.
I've heard accounts that Bell hunts the area and is very bold. Have you ever heard anything unusual or found anything?
Never have, but there are local folks around here that swear by it. They say you can go up on the bluff up here, look over this field, and he's buried in this field right across the other side of the river here. And they believe that that's where he buried his gold. There's, you know, tales of lights floating around out there. Then some of the other locals will tell you, oh, that's foxfire, that's a plant that glows or whatnot. But there are some folks out here that firmly believe that he is looking for his lost buried gold. And then again, we get back to his shrewd. He was constantly concerned. It wouldn't surprise me if he buried gold somewhere. But probably may have been found if that was the case.
Have you ever walked through the tunnel? If so, what?
Yes, I have walked through the tunnel in really low water, walked through this end here. Like I said, the far end is caverning out. It's probably, oh goodness, maybe even 20 feet high on the inside in there. But as you walk about the first, 15, 20 feet or so or here, it's the normal size, but there's a nice gully there. I thought the water wasn't very deep. You step in and it's about knee deep in there. So, yeah, and then, like I said, when it's like this, there's really no turning back, so you're walking through water, then you kind of walk up, and like I said, it's collapsing. I think we're at a point now where it shouldn't go too much farther for a while, but eventually it's going to continue on. And you can see the rocks out here. A lot of these rocks have come from the inside of the tunnel.
The last question is, have you ever found any tools that could have been used to maintain the water?
I have not. Now, when we had the flood in 2010, all this ground around here that we were standing at was upheaved. And there are a couple timbers, and we're not sure. There's some timbers down here on the ground. And when the water's really low, you can see them. We wonder if that might have been the landing where they would have brought the car. They would have brought the iron ore back here, same path that we walked, basically. And it would make most sense that it would have come right down to here. We're not sure, that's just the best guess. There's a large timber here the street's washed through, and a large post there, and we wonder if that might have been a brace or a support for it. Now, long before I can't give you an idea on a date or time. We were a satellite of Montgomery Bell State Park, meaning we were just kind of an extension of it. And the water got really low, and my guess would have been the 80s. And I'm not, like I said, I'm not exactly sure when it was. But they found a large stone wheel out here. And the story goes, it wound up at Montgomery Bell State Park in the maintenance shop. And a new manager came in at one point and decided to clean the maintenance shop out, and somebody took that stone to the Dixon County landfill, not knowing what it was, and they never found it again. So a piece of history got buried. So yes, at one point something was found. We do find pieces of the slag or the iron ore, little bits left over here and there, still to this very day, as we showed you earlier. So yeah, there are still remnants of it out here today.